I'm a poet, but I also write cross-genre. I write in prose and creative nonfiction and some fiction as well. But
Could you get a little closer to the mic?
oh, sure.
Thank you.
But today I'm going to mostly share poetry from my first collection, full-length collection, yay, Inconsolable Objects. I'm really grateful to be here in Wyoming. It's wonderful. On the Jentel website, Nelchi, who was the visionary behind Jentel, is quoted as saying, "Who knows where or how ideas germinate?" And that's something I think about a lot as a poet, and I think all of us think about that. Where do ideas come from? Where do poems come from? So I wanted to start by sharing with you the first poem in my collection, because it's not only an origin story, it's also an ekphrastic piece. It was written in response to a photograph of a little girl. So that's me. That's my first grade picture. And I was motivated, I was inspired to write the poem because that's a snapshot not only of who I was then, but who I ultimately became, who I am now. So I'll begin with that poem. Snapshot. And I put a copy there for you to follow along with. I was a hand grenade of a girl, vacuum packed into a dress that bound my body like a bandage, staunching a wound. My arms were cinched in tourniquets of tulle, my throat choked in a rage of lace. I'd hacked my hair into chaos, kept it ragged and short, kept my fists clenched in the fuselage of my lap. My eyes, 2 foxholes. No light escaped. My lips stretched across my face like a tripwire. The man with the camera said, "You can do better. Give me a smile." I set my mouth into the look I've kept all these years. That's still me in the photo, waiting to pull the pin. So a couple of things about that photo. As a child, I did not know how to fake a smile. I couldn't do it. So when a strange man told me to smile, that grimace was about as close as I could get. I also was feeling incredibly miserable because I hated that dress that I was wearing, and I really felt like it was an act of betrayal on the part of my mother, who I think was just trying to gussy me up, because 2 days before picture day, I had cut my own hair in the hopes that I would never again have to brush it. You can see she put a little clip in my hair trying to fix it up, but it didn't really work. But anyway, that photo inspired that poem, became that poem. And other poems come from, they come from memory. They come from experiences. They come from things I read. They come from art. I'm going to read a couple more poems that were sort of germinated from memory. Also, I write a lot about place because I grew up in Kansas, and it's very rooted in me, that sort of Americana from the Midwest. Tilt-a-whirl. It was a hot day in Paola, Kansas. The rides were banging around empty as we moved through the carnival music and catcalls. At the Tilt-a-whirl, we were the only ones. My big sister chose our carriage carefully, walking a full circle until she stopped. The ride operator didn't take his eyes off her. Long dark hair and amber eyes ringed like the golden interior of a newly felled pine. She didn't seem to notice him lingering as he checked the lap bar, and my sister asked in her sweetest, most innocent, or maybe not so innocent voice, "Can we have a long ride, please, mister?" When he sat back down at the joystick, he made a show of lighting his smoke while the cage of his face settled into a smile I would one day learn to recognize. And those dizzying red teacups began to spin my sister and me into woozy amusement. We forgot the man, the heat, our thighs sticking to the vinyl seats, our bodies glued together in a centrifugal blur of happiness beneath a red metal canopy as we picked up speed and started to laugh, our heads thrown back, mouths open, the fabric of my sister's shirt clinging to the swinging globes of her breasts as we went faster and faster, though by then we had begun to scream, "Stop, please, stop," until our voices grew hoarse beneath the clattering pivots and dips, the air filling with diesel and cigarettes, and the man at the control stick waiting for us to spin toward him again. And each time he cocked his hand as if sighting prey down the barrel of a gun. So here's another poem. I think last night Brenda and I were talking about the fact that creative nonfiction and poetry are very closely aligned, the difference being that creative nonfiction has the added burden of needing to be factual in addition to being true, whereas poetry just has to be true, doesn't have to be factual. I'll let you decide whether this one is factual or not. Also takes place in Kansas. Resurrection. When I was 5, my brother convinced me to perform mouth-to-mouth on a catfish floating belly up in the scum that gathered in the lake behind our house. He said I had the power to bring it back, though it was my choice. I followed his directions, leaned over the dock, pressed my lips against the stiff ridge of its mouth while keeping its bloated body submerged beneath the oily sheen, and began to breathe in and out as I opened and closed the bony folds of its gills. At first, my brother held my ankles to steady me so I wouldn't fall off the dock. I kept breathing in through my nose, sting of creosote and pond rot, and out through my mouth, a soft exhale of prayer. You already know I did not bring the fish back to life, though it wasn't for lack of trying. I kept breathing into that dark opening long after my brother said to quit, long after he got bored and wandered off, and the setting sun bathed the brackish water in gold. I kept breathing in and out long after the night cooled and the stars rose, and my mother found me asleep on the dock, her voice calling me back from that place where the fish turned its rapturous eyes away from the moon and dove back to its sanctuary of darkness. Next slide. I am a bit of a junker. Those of you who've spent some time with me know this. I love to go to junk stores and thrift stores and antique stores, and I particularly love ephemera, old photographs and postcards. In my junking, I've stumbled across these old photographs from the Victorian era that oddly have their, because the children had to sit very still for the camera for the long exposure times back then, the mothers had to hold the babies, but they didn't want the mother in the photo, so they just threw a blanket over her head, which is so weird because it totally distracts from the thing that they were trying to take a picture of, which is the baby. You can't see the baby because you're so distracted by the cloaked mother. Anyway, I love these photos because they truly feel very emblematic of, it's the ultimate erasure of the mother, of the woman. And so these became an inspiration for me for this next poem, which is called The Invisible Mother. And it begins with an epigraph because normally you wouldn't get to see those photographs. In the Victorian era, young children were photographed with their mothers present but hidden. Wikipedia. The mother's shape draped in dark cloth takes on the properties of a chair, a curtain, a cloak. She becomes a living field of fabric, a blank screen, an erasure. Lint gathers in her eyes, and the corners of her mouth. She is the rustling in the room, the empty place where dust gathers. Her heart is made of cobwebs, her words glued to the roof of her mouth. No one sees her chin quivering like a small bird. She has folded her sorrows into napkins, placed at a table set for her children. They feast until nothing is left but her absence. Her fingers tap out time, measuring seconds. She is a forgotten thought, a lamp, a stage, a station of the cross. She bears it silently, this weight, her babies propped across her motionless body. She wears the finery of their bones to mask her naked face. She is counterbalance, stanchion, a breathing pillar of brocade, the space where she begins and ends, debated endlessly in velvet. So I also write to news articles sometimes, and this is a poem that begins with an epigraph from a news article. It's called, there's another picture of the, look, they covered her with a bear skin or something. What is that? So you can find these photographs if you look for them. I collect them. I have some at home. And there's you can look them up online. Lost. A boy who was lost in the woods says a bear kept him company. No one can prove it didn't happen. CNN. The bear felt the boy before she heard him, sensed a disturbance deep in the knotweed, and knew something was scared there. At first, it unnerved her, but its cub-like crying drew her closer, till a shift of wind brought the unnatural smell she'd learned to fear. She hesitated, sniffed again. This was different, not so manlike or musky. It was nuanced with sugar and sour milk. She was cubless that winter and drawn toward the hurt animal, not with a hunger, but an ache. The orphan had curled up like a pup, nose to knees, whimpering. She patted in, snuffing softly, singing a lullaby of grunts and chuffs. The child turned toward her musty breath, reached his numb fingers out for her coarse coat. She curled in her claws and laid down slowly, settled herself so she wouldn't crush him, made her body into a cradle and tucked him into her. He dozed. She stayed that night and the next, as the temperature dropped below freezing. He told her his stories, purple crayons, night kitchens, magic pebbles. She clicked her tongue and hummed about meltwater and spring. When she heard the far-off calls growing closer, she licked the fringe of blonde fur on his forehead, nudged him awake, and left. Back in the fold of his family, they noticed his unwavering gaze, the way he hesitated in doorways, grazing the air with his face, scenting the room, as if always searching for something he'd lost.
That's okay. Your snapshot poem was shared on the Jentel Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
And when it popped up on my screen when I was working from home, I had to close my laptop and go take a walk afterwards. It was so lovely and so powerful, and yeah, it was just like the exact right thing for me to read at the exact right time.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
I also have a comment, more of a comment, because I tend to like shorter format poems just because, they don't drag on, they get to the point. I really like your style of poetry, because you do have long format as well,
Mm-hmm.
but it still hits everything I need it to right at the right time, just like Kevin was saying. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you tell us about two things actually. Have you ever looked at the work of Laura Larson? She's a photographer in Ohio, and she wrote a book called Hidden Mother that actually tells the story of her child's adoption through these food photos that she
I haven't
recreated.
seen that.
Anyway, I'll send
Okay.
it to you, so you should.
I would love that. There is a coffee table book of these, but it's not hers.
No,
Yeah.
It's really, because it's photography, but also narrative about motherhood, and anyway.
Right.
So that's interesting.
Well, you'll notice on the cover there's a little girl facing the wall, kind of a symbol of inconsolableness. I write a lot. I'm really attracted to broken things and broken people, because I think we're all broken. And I kind of write to that. And most of the poems in my collection are sort of addressing that brokenness and how we love each other through that brokenness and past that brokenness. And so, yeah, thank you for asking that. But that is where the title comes from. There is a poem in the collection that's kind of a list poem. It's called the Incomplete Catalog of Inconsolable Objects, and it's just a list of things I've found that were broken that are inconsolable, but that speak to me, you know?
So, quick question. Where's the most unusual place you have drawn inspiration from?
The most unusual place, oh my gosh, that's, I've drawn inspiration from some pretty unusual places.
A dead catfish.
That's pretty unusual. I'm trying to think if there's other, a snake getting chopped up in the garbage disposal was probably the most unusual. Yeah, and that's in this book too. Yeah.